Young Millionaire married a poor girl to avoid an arranged marriage, but her true identity shocked him. The rain poured heavily over the city, drenching the streets in silver reflections of neon lights. Inside a dimly lit penthouse, Adrian Lancaster, the heir to the billion-dollar Lancaster empire, stared at his own reflection in the massive glass window. His jaw was clenched, his hands curled into fists. Tomorrow, he was supposed to marry Celeste Renford, the daughter of his father's closest business partner. A cold, calculated merger disguised as a wedding. Celeste was beautiful, sophisticated, and bred for high society, but Adrian knew the truth. She was ruthless. A woman with secrets darker than midnight, and a hunger for power that could consume even him. He couldn't let this happen. Adrian turned away from the window, grabbing his coat. His decision was made. If he had to be married to inherit his father's empire, then he would choose his own bride. Not one picked by his family, not a woman who viewed him as an asset. He would find someone, anyone, but Celeste. And so, in the dead of night, Adrian walked out of his gilded cage and into the unknown. A fateful encounter. The slums of East Hollow were a stark contrast to the opulence Adrian had always known. The streets smelled of rain-soaked earth and desperation. People huddled under broken streetlights, their eyes hollow with hunger. That's when he saw her. A girl. She sat on the edge of the pavement, wrapped in a thin shawl, her face hidden beneath the hood of her tattered coat. She was barely noticeable amidst the shadows, but something about her stilled Adrian's steps. A group of drunk men staggered toward her, their laughter thick with malice. Adrian's eyes narrowed. He watched as one of them reached for the girl's hood, yanking it back. And for a split second, Adrian forgot how to breathe. Her face was breathtaking, but not in the way of polished socialites or celebrities. There was something raw about her beauty, something tragic and fierce all at once. Her dark eyes held secrets, stories she would never tell. The man laughed, grabbing her wrist. "Come on, sweetheart, no need to be shy." Before he could finish, Adrian's fist collided with his jaw. The man crumpled to the ground. The others backed away, sensing danger, before disappearing into the night. The girl didn't move. She just stared at Adrian, her expression unreadable. "Are you all right?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pulled her hood back up, shielding her face. "I don't owe you my gratitude," she said finally, her voice like smoke and embers. Adrian smirked. "Good. I don't need it." She narrowed her eyes. "Then why are you here?" Adrian didn't know how to explain it, how to tell her that he was running. From expectations, from control, from a future he didn't want. Instead he asked, "What's your name?" She hesitated, then murmured, "Rain." A fitting name for the girl who looked like a storm waiting to break. Adrian made a reckless decision. "Marry me." She blinked. "What? You need money." "I need a wife to avoid an arranged marriage. It's a fair trade." Silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, Rain smiled. But there was something chilling in the way her lips curved. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into, Adrian Lancaster." And just like that, the deal was made. But Adrian had no way of knowing. Rain was far more than she seemed. And marrying her would unravel secrets that could destroy him. Adrian didn't return to the Lancaster mansion that night. Instead, he took Rain to a quiet, discreet chapel on the outskirts of the city. The officiant barely asked questions. Money ensured his silence. Under the dim glow of flickering candles, Adrian Lancaster and Rain, the nameless girl from the slums, were bound in matrimony. There was no romance. No soft whispers of love or tender promises. It was a transaction. As Adrian slipped the ring onto Rain's finger, a strange shiver ran down his spine. It wasn't hesitation. It was something else. Something unexplainable, as if he had just signed a contract with a force beyond his understanding. Rain, however, barely reacted. She looked at the gold band on her finger with detached amusement, as if it were some inside joke only she understood. "You're officially Mrs. Lancaster," Adrian murmured, watching her carefully. Her lips twitched in a smirk, but she said nothing. And in that silence, Adrian felt the first whisper of dread. By dawn, they arrived at Adrian's penthouse, high above the city. Rain stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing at the breathtaking skyline. "Not bad," she murmured. Adrian leaned against the doorway, studying her. Something about her unnerved him. She wasn't acting like someone who had just gone from having nothing to being the wife of one of the richest men in the country. There was no excitement, no awe. It was as if she had been here before. "You can stay in the guest room," he said. "We don't need to pretend when we're alone." She turned to him, her dark eyes glinting. "Oh, so no wedding night, Mr. Lancaster?" Adrian narrowed his eyes. He had expected Rain to be overwhelmed, maybe even intimidated by his world. Instead, she was toying with him. "I don't expect anything from you," he said coolly. "This is a business arrangement." "That's all." Rain chuckled. "Of course. Just business." She turned away again, but for the briefest moment, Adrian thought he saw something flicker in her expression, something almost knowing. He didn't like it. Days passed. Then weeks. The world was in an uproar over Adrian's sudden marriage to a complete unknown. Reporters camped outside his building, eager to uncover the mysterious wife of the Lancaster heir. Rain played her role perfectly. In public, she was composed, elegant, almost as if she had been trained for high society. But in private, Adrian noticed things. Strange things. She never asked questions about his wealth. Most people, especially those who came from poverty, would have been overwhelmed, but Rain acted like money meant nothing to her. She moved through his penthouse as if she had lived there before. The way she navigated the massive space, the way her fingers trailed over furniture, as if she were remembering rather than discovering. She disappeared at odd hours. Sometimes, in the dead of night, Adrian would wake up and find Rain's side of the apartment empty. And then there were the phone calls. One night, Adrian woke to the soft murmur of her voice. He followed the sound, stopping just outside the study. The door was slightly open. "I told you, don't call me here," Rain whispered harshly. A pause. Then no. "He doesn't know anything yet." Adrian's blood turned to ice. Who was she talking to? And what exactly didn't he know? It happened 3 weeks after their wedding. Adrian had just returned from a board meeting when he noticed something unusual. The door to his study, normally locked, was slightly open. Frowning, he stepped inside. Nothing seemed out of place, until he noticed the safe. It was open. His pulse spiked. Only he knew the combination. No one should have been able to access it. He quickly checked inside. His documents were still there. The cash was untouched. But something was missing. A single photograph. A photograph of his mother. Adrian's stomach clenched. He turned sharply, his mind racing. Only one person had been in the apartment all day. Rain. He stormed out of the study, his jaw clenched. He found her in the living room, casually reading a book. Too casual. "Did you go into my study?" His voice was ice. Rain didn't even flinch. She simply lifted her gaze to him, her expression unreadable. "Why would I?" she asked lightly. Adrian studied her carefully. She wasn't lying. But she wasn't telling the truth, either. And that's when he realized his wife was keeping secrets. Dark secrets. Adrian started digging. He hired private investigators. He searched records. He even had his contacts in law enforcement check her background. Nothing. Rain didn't exist. There was no birth certificate. No medical records. No past addresses. It was as if she had appeared out of thin air. And then, one night, he found the first real clue. A single name. A name that sent a shiver down his spine. Rain Calloway. Not Rain Lancaster. Not a nameless street girl. Calloway. The name of a family that had been wiped out in a massacre 15 years ago. A family that had once been just as powerful as the Lancasters, until they were betrayed, framed for crimes they didn't commit. And executed. Everyone had died. The parents. The siblings. Except one. A daughter. A girl who had vanished into the night, her body never found. Adrian's chest tightened. His pulse roared in his ears as he stared at the name. His wife wasn't just a stranger. She was a ghost from the past. A girl who should have been dead. And now, she was in his home. In his bed. Wearing his ring. A chill ran down his spine. What did Rain want? Why had she married him? And more importantly, was he next? Adrian sat in his study, the weight of the discovery pressing against his chest like an iron cage. Rain Calloway. The name kept repeating in his mind, unraveling everything he thought he knew about his wife. She wasn't just some girl from the streets. She was the last survivor of a family that had been destroyed. And now, she was in his home, sleeping under his roof, wearing his name. Had this been her plan all along? To get close? To infiltrate the Lancaster family and take revenge for whatever had happened all those years ago? Adrian clenched his fists. He needed answers. And he was going to get them, tonight. The penthouse was eerily silent when Adrian stepped into the bedroom. Rain sat by the window, gazing at the city lights. The golden glow bathed her in a haunting radiance, making her look almost unreal, almost untouchable. Rain. His voice was sharp, cutting through the silence like a blade. She didn't turn. You found out. Adrian's heart slammed against his ribs. She knew. She had known this moment would come. How long were you going to keep lying to me? He demanded, stepping closer. Or was this the plan all along? Marry me. Infiltrate my family. And then what? Kill me in my sleep. Finally, she turned. And when she did, her eyes held something Adrian had never seen before. Regret. I never planned to kill you, Adrian. Her voice was quiet. If I did, you'd already be dead. Adrian stiffened. Then tell me the truth. She sighed, looking back at the skyline. For a moment, she wasn't his wife. She was a ghost. A girl trapped in memories darker than the night. My family was murdered when I was 7, she murmured. One by one, they were taken. Executed like animals. I watched my mother die. I heard my father's screams. And then, when it was my turn, she stopped, her hands trembling for the first time. Someone helped me escape. Adrian didn't move. I spent years running, hiding, learning how to survive. She turned back to him, her gaze like steel. And then I found out who was responsible. Adrian already knew the answer before she said it. The Lancasters. A cold chill seeped into his bones. No, Adrian said immediately. That's not possible. Isn't it? Rain's lips curled in a bitter smile. Your father and his partners framed mine for crimes they never committed. They set them up, had them executed, and then they took everything. Adrian's breath came shallow. He had heard whispers before, unspoken rumors about how his father had risen to power, but he had never believed them. Until now. Until Rain. Adrian couldn't sleep that night. He sat alone in his study, sifting through old files, documents buried deep in the Lancaster archives. And there it was. The proof. The transactions. The fabricated evidence. The silent payoffs to keep the truth hidden. Everything Rain had said was true. His father had destroyed the Calloways. And Adrian, whether he had known it or not, was part of that legacy. A part of him wanted to be furious. Wanted to call Rain a liar. But he couldn't. Because the truth was right in front of him. And now, he understood. This wasn't just a marriage. It was a reckoning. The next morning, Adrian found Rain in the kitchen, sipping coffee like nothing had changed. Except everything had. He leaned against the counter, watching her carefully. What happens now? She looked at him over the rim of her mug. And for the first time, he saw it. The hesitation. The conflict. The part of her that had come here with a purpose, only to find something she hadn't expected. I don't know, she admitted finally. I thought I did. I thought revenge was all I had left. Adrian swallowed. And now? Rain looked away. Now. I'm not sure anymore. Silence. And then a single message flashed on Adrian's phone. A number he didn't recognize. A single line of text. She is not who you think she is. And neither are you. Adrian's pulse thundered. Before he could respond, the power in the penthouse flickered. The lights went out. And then, the first gunshot rang through the night. The gunshot shattered the silence like a scream. Adrian didn't hesitate. Instinct took over. He grabbed Rain and pulled her down just as a second shot rang out, shattering the glass window behind them. The penthouse was suddenly filled with the sound of cracking glass and rushing wind. "Get down," he ordered. Rain, however, wasn't frozen in fear like most people would be. She moved fast. Too fast. In the chaos, she rolled onto her feet and darted toward the nearest cabinet, pulling out a gun he didn't even know she had hidden there. Adrian's blood ran cold. Who the hell was she? "Stay low," she hissed, pressing her back against the counter. "They won't stop until one of us is dead." One of us. Adrian's mind raced. Was this about him? About her? Or was it both? The power was still out. The emergency lights flickered dimly, casting eerie shadows against the walls. The air was thick with tension, the sound of footsteps approaching from the hallway. Whoever was after them was already inside. Adrian grabbed a knife from the counter, not much against a gun, but better than nothing. His heartbeat was steady, trained from years of control, but adrenaline burned in his veins. A shadow moved near the doorway. 2 men. Armed. They wore all black, their faces masked, moving like professionals. Not robbers. Not random assassins. These were trained killers. And they were here for Rain. The moment they stepped into the kitchen, Rain moved. She didn't hesitate, didn't scream. She struck first. Her gun fired twice, both shots hitting clean. The first man dropped instantly, blood spraying against the marble floor. The second one ducked, returning fire. Adrian barely had time to pull Rain out of the way as bullets slammed into the counter. "Who are they?" Adrian growled. Rain's eyes flashed. "If I say old friends, would you believe me?" Adrian scowled. "Try again." But there was no time. The second man was still moving. He lunged, a knife glinting in his hand. Adrian barely sidestepped in time, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting hard. A sickening crack echoed as the assassin howled in pain. Then, a final gunshot. The man collapsed. Adrian turned, his chest heaving. Rain stood behind him, her gun still raised, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. And then, the fire alarm blared. Somewhere in the building, security would be swarming soon. The police. Questions. Cameras. They had to get out. Rain looked at the bodies on the floor, then back at Adrian. "If we stay, we're dead." Adrian wiped the blood off his hands and grabbed his coat. "Then let's go." The city was alive with chaos as they disappeared into the night. Adrian's private car was compromised. His penthouse was no longer safe. His entire world had just turned upside down, and the only person who had any answers was his wife. They ended up in a rundown motel on the outskirts of town, far from the luxury Adrian had always known. The neon sign outside flickered weakly, casting a sickly glow into the room. Rain was at the window, gun still in hand, watching the streets below. She hadn't let her guard down once. Adrian leaned against the wall, arms crossed. His shirt was stained with blood, not his, but it didn't matter. Nothing made sense anymore. Finally, he spoke. "Start talking." Rain didn't turn. "About what? Don't play dumb." His voice was cold. "Who were they? Why were they after you?" A pause. "And they weren't after me," she murmured. Adrian stiffened. "What?" She turned to him, and for the first time, he saw it. The fear. "They weren't after me, Adrian." She swallowed. "They were after you." The room fell into silence. Adrian's mind raced, trying to piece together the truth. "I don't have enemies like that," he said slowly. Rain let out a bitter laugh. "You really don't know, do you?" Adrian narrowed his eyes. "Know what?" She hesitated. Then, finally, "The truth about who you really are." Adrian's pulse pounded in his ears. The truth about who he really was? The words hung between them, thick with tension, thick with fear. Rain took a slow breath, finally lowering her gun. "I never meant to tell you this," she admitted. "I thought I could just take what I needed and disappear. But now it's too late." Adrian clenched his fists. "Tell me." She hesitated, but then she spoke. And when she did, Adrian's entire world unraveled. "You were never meant to be Adrian Lancaster." The words hit him like a bullet to the chest. Rain's gaze was steady, but beneath it, there was sorrow. "You weren't born into the Lancaster family. You were taken." Adrian felt the ground shift beneath him. "That's impossible." Rain shook her head. The Callaways weren't the only family destroyed that night. There was another, smaller, quieter. A family that was supposed to disappear without a trace. "Your real parents." Adrian's breathing turned sharp, ragged. "No," he muttered. "No, my father." "Isn't your father," Rain finished. "Your real family was executed along with mine. But you were spared. Not out of kindness, but because you were useful. The Lancasters needed a son, an heir, someone they could shape in their image." Her voice dropped lower. "They erased your past, Adrian. They made you one of them." Adrian stood in silence, staring at the floor. His whole life, everything, had been a lie. He had built his empire on the ashes of a stolen identity. And now, the past had finally come for him. Rain stepped closer. "You can walk away," she murmured. "Forget what I told you. Keep living in their world, pretending none of this ever happened." Adrian lifted his gaze. Something in him had changed. "No," he said. Rain stilled. "I'm done pretending." She searched his face. "That means war, Adrian." A slow, dark smirk touched his lips. "Then let's start one." Somewhere in the city, the Lancaster family would soon learn that their secrets had unraveled, that the son they had stolen had finally woken up, and that Adrian Lancaster was coming for them. For justice. For revenge. For the truth. And he wasn't alone. Rain stepped beside him, a ghost of a smile on her lips. "Took you long enough." Adrian exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of his past finally lift. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. And this time, the Lancasters would fall, just like they had made so many others fall before them.